Chapter 78. Listen and repeat. A conversation. If he'd save money, he could go on holiday. If she'd studied shorthand, she could get a better job. If I'd registered early, I'd have a better timetable. If he'd studied that unit, he'd be able to solve the problem. If he hadn't seen the doctor, he'd be ill. If they'd listened to the lecture, they'd understand what the teacher is saying now. If he'd studied harder, he wouldn't be failing the course. If he'd arrived on time, he'd be sitting at his desk now. He could go on holiday if he'd saved some money. She could get a better job if she'd studied shorthand. I'd have a better timetable if I'd registered early. He'd be able to solve the problem if he'd studied that unit. He'd be ill if he hadn't seen the doctor. They'd understand what the teacher is saying now if they'd listened to the lecture. He wouldn't be failing the course if he'd studied harder. He'd be sitting at his desk now if he'd arrived on time. What was she invited to? She was invited to a party. Can she go to the party? No, she can't. Why can't she go to the party? She's come down with a cold. What's she doing instead of going to the party? Instead of going to the party, she's lying in bed. What's at her elbow? There's a box of tissues at her elbow. What's she thinking about? She's thinking about the party. What would she be doing if she'd gone to the party? If she'd gone to the party, she'd be chatting to her friends. What else would she be doing? If she'd gone to the party, she'd be dancing. Would she be having a good time? If she'd gone to the party, she'd be having fun. What's she doing instead? Instead, she's sneezing and coughing. Who did he visit? He visited his aunt and uncle. What did he want to get? He wanted to get some photographs of them. How did they look? Their faces were very serious. How could he get a better picture? If they smiled, he could get a better picture. What was he sure of? He was sure that it was possible for them to smile. What did they do, however? However, they kept on frowning. What did he do? He told them a joke. What did he think he could do if they laughed? If they laughed, he could snap their picture hurriedly. Did they laugh? They just looked puzzled. Did he ever get a picture of them smiling? No, he never did. Vocabulary. Accomplished, adjective. Ambitious, adjective. At one's elbow. Board of Trade. Brief, adjective. Broad, adjective. Civil service. Commercial, adjective. Continent, noun. The continent. Desirable, adjective. Edinburgh. Elbow, noun. Face, noun. Firm, adjective. Fond of, adjective. Governmental. Hurriedly, adverb. Lifetime, noun. Mass, noun. Monument, noun. Monumental, adjective. Nephew, noun. Niece, noun. Paperwork, noun. Pool, noun. Promotion, noun. Scotch, adjective. Scotland, noun. Scottish, adjective. Spare, adjective. Statistician, noun. Statistics, noun. Subject, noun. Surprise, noun. Theatrical, adjective. Tissue, noun. Trade, noun. Trend, noun. Wheel, noun. Verbs: to analyze, to be fond of, to be fun, to become/get bad, to chat, to come down with, to cough, to frown, to graduate, to hate, to hesitate, to house, to lie, lay, lane, to line, to look out, on, to occupy, to perform, to prepare, to present, to puzzle, to regulate, to smile at someone/at something, to snap, to spill, spilt, spilled, spilt, spilled, to spill over. Grammar notes. To graduate. This verb can be followed by the prepositions from or at to indicate the university where the degree was obtained. It is followed by in to specify the subject in which one graduated. To hate. This verb, like other verbs expressing emotions, is not used in the progressive form. It can be followed by a direct object, by a verb in the ing form, or by an infinitive with to. To lie, lay, lane. This irregular verb changes its stem in the gerund form as well. Verbs ending in ie change ie to y before adding ing. Lie to lying. Reading. London is filled with monumental buildings which house the many offices of government. In fact, the government has spilled over into many commercial office buildings in the city and its suburbs. All this office space is occupied by hundreds of people who perform all the paperwork that seems to be necessary to feed the government. Most of these hundreds of employees come from all over the country because government jobs are very desirable, because they offer security, lifetime security. But government jobs don't appeal to the ambitious, for example. The promotions are all carefully regulated. Anna Peterson came to London 34 years ago. She was 21 years old then, and she had just graduated from the University of Edinburgh. She really had no firm plans for her future. She expected that she would get married and settle down in a small town in Scotland. However, she had taken a civil service test as a clerk typist and was offered an appointment in the Board of Trade. She hesitated for a few days, but then decided to accept the appointment. She felt that a few years as a working girl would be fun. Then she would come home and get married and settle down in that small Scottish town. Now it's 34 years later, and she's still at her desk in the department, where she can look out on the park that surrounds the building. It's not the same desk at which she started, because she has been quite successful in her career. She quickly discovered that she had an aptitude for figures. This was something of a surprise, since her subject at college had been English. She studied maths and statistics at night during her first few years in London. Now she works as a statistician. She analyzes the mass of information that comes into the department and helps to prepare reports on business trends. Anna, her full name is Annette and she hates it, has a comfortable flat on a broad, tree-lined street that leads out to the suburbs. She used to drive her own car to work, but traffic and parking became so bad that she joined a carpool. 4 women share a car and expenses. In her spare time, she attends symphony and opera performances and the plays that are presented by theatrical companies. She has become very fond of the city, with its parks and monuments and museums. Every year, her nieces and nephews come to visit her, and she becomes an accomplished guide to the sights of London. The first few years that she worked in London, she went back to Scotland every summer for her holiday. But in the last 5 years, she has been home only once, for a brief weekend to attend the wedding of one of her nieces. She herself didn't get married. Grammar notes. The verb to feed can also be used figuratively, meaning to support or to keep alive. Therefore, the expression, who perform all the paperwork that seems to be necessary to feed the government, can be translated as, who carry out all the paperwork that seems necessary to keep the government running. The adjective ambitious is used here as a noun. In English, some adjectives referring to human qualities or conditions can function as nouns. They usually refer to a group or class of people, must be preceded by the definite article, and never take the plural s or possessive apostrophe s. In the sentence, "This was something of a surprise," the phrase "of a surprise" has a partitive meaning and refers to the indefinite pronoun something. It can be translated as, "This was something of a surprise," to, "This was, in a way, a surprise." In the expression, "since her subject at college had been English," we find a typical feature of the British university system. University studies revolve around specific disciplines, subjects, one of which is chosen as a specialization. In the phrase, "a broad, tree-lined street," the adjective tree-lined is a compound adjective formed from the past participle of to line and the noun tree. It means a street bordered with trees. Comprehension exercise. Who is the office space in the governmental and many commercial buildings in London occupied by? It is occupied by hundreds of people who do all the paperwork necessary to keep the government running. Do most of these employees come from London? No, they come from all over the country. Why are government jobs very desirable? Because they offer lifetime security. Why don't government jobs appeal to ambitious people? Because promotions are carefully regulated. How long has Anna Peterson been in London? She has been in London for 34 years. What did she expect to do after she graduated from the University of Edinburgh? She expected to get married and settle down in a small town in Scotland. What had she taken? What was she offered? She had taken a civil service test and was offered a job in the Board of Trade. Why did she decide to accept the appointment? Because she thought it would be fun to work for a few years before getting married. What does she look out on from her desk? She looks out on the park that surrounds the building. What did she discover that she had an aptitude for? She discovered that she had an aptitude for figures. What does she do now? She works as a statistician. Where does she live? She lives in a comfortable flat on a broad, tree-lined street leading to the suburbs. Why did she join a carpool? Because traffic and parking became too difficult. What does she do in her spare time? She goes to concerts, operas, and theatrical performances. Who does she show the sights of London to? She shows them to her nieces and nephews. What did she do the first few years that she was in London? She went back to Scotland every summer for her holidays. How often has she been home in the last 5 years? Only once, for a brief weekend to attend her niece's wedding. Is she married? No, she isn't. Grammar conditional sentences. Possible condition in the past. Last year, a lot of students wanted to get into an engineering school. If they took maths, then it would be easier for them.
Mary was planning her summer holidays. If she went to the continent, she'd see a lot of interesting sights. The same sequence of tenses, simple past in the if clause and present conditional in the main clause, which is normally used in the second conditional to refer to present or future hypotheses, can also be used for past hypotheses whose realization was still possible at that time. The speaker does not know or does not wish to specify whether the condition was actually fulfilled. Thus, the first example, "If they took maths, then it would be easier for them," implies it was possible for them to take maths then. Because of its meaning, this type of conditional sentence is often used with indefinite or impersonal subjects. In Italian, there is no precise equivalent of this conditional structure indicating a possible condition in the past. Therefore, it is usually translated as if it were a third conditional. Indirect speech. Statements. Mark said, "I like dogs." Mark said that he liked dogs. Mark said, "Anna is having breakfast." Mark said that Anna was having breakfast. Mark said, "My parents will be in Paris next Monday." Mark said that his parents would be in Paris the following Monday. As we have already mentioned regarding the transformation of interrogative sentences from direct to indirect speech, it is possible in English, as in Italian, to report what someone has said in two ways, direct and indirect speech. In direct speech, we report the exact words spoken, enclosed in quotation marks and preceded by a comma or colon. In indirect, reported speech, however, we convey the meaning of what was said, but the form of the sentence changes. When transforming a statement into indirect speech, the conjunction that may or may not be used. The main changes affect personal and possessive pronouns, demonstratives, this/these, and the adverb here, time expressions, verb tenses, if the reporting verb is in the past. When the reporting verb is in the past, the following tense changes apply. Direct speech to indirect speech. Simple present to simple past. Present progressive to past progressive. Will/shall. Future to present conditional. Comprehension Exercise 1. The office space in the governmental and many commercial buildings in London is occupied by hundreds of people who perform all the paperwork that seems to be necessary to feed the government. 2. No, they don't. 3. Government jobs are very desirable because they offer lifetime security. 4. Government jobs don't appeal to ambitious people because the promotions are all carefully regulated. 5. She has been in London for 34 years. 6. After she graduated from the University of Edinburgh, she expected she would get married and settle down in a small town in Scotland. 7. She had taken a civil service test as a clerk typist and was offered an appointment in the Board of Trade. 8. She decided to accept the appointment because she felt that a few years as a working girl would be fun. 9. From her desk, she looks out on the park that surrounds the building. 10. She discovered that she had an aptitude for figures. 11. Now she works as a statistician. 12. She lives in a comfortable flat on a broad, tree-lined street that leads out to the suburbs. 13. She joined a carpool because traffic and parking became so bad. 14. In her spare time, she attends symphony and opera performances and the plays that are presented by theatrical companies. 15. She shows the sights of London to her nieces and nephews, who come to visit her every year. 16. The first few years that she was in London, she went back to Scotland every summer for her holiday. 17. In the last 5 years, she has been home only once. 18. No, she isn't.